Talk to me about how you think the Me Too movement impacted dating.
I look at it from the standpoint of women, and yeah, I'm not. I mean, I think in general, I think the Me Too movement has been good for dating and good for men because it's clearer now. There was a lot of gray area behavior before Me Too, which men, I think, unfortunately thought was okay, but never really was okay. And me, probably like lots of other men, after the Me Too movement launched, I, I spent some time thinking back about experiences I'd had when I was younger that seemed perfectly fine at the time, but weren't. And I think this has been important. Um, but I think there's a real value for everyone to think about how the gains, the changes and gains we've made thanks to the Me Too movement, how that might impact traditional dating strategies that involve playing hard to get. Because, as you know, pretty much every popular dating book that's been written over the past 30 years, from the rules to ignore the guy, get the guy, to why men love bitches, they all revolve around a very complicated version of playing hard to get. And look, I wasn't dating in 1950. Maybe playing hard to get worked really, really well back then. And I'm not saying it didn't. But I do believe that nowadays, and I actually think to a certain extent, even before the Me Too movement, that playing hard to get has become harder and harder. And I mean, think about it this way, that if you're a guy at a party and you're talking to a woman and she seems disinterested, the correct response is not to assume she's playing hard to get and wants you to keep at it. The correct response is to leave her alone. So if you have all these dating book gurus like the rules ladies telling women, and I think in one of their books they actually say explicitly, um, uh, "Don't act so interested. Treat him like a guy you don't like." Well, that's not going to work nowadays. And I'm not saying that to defend the men. I'm saying this to give an advantage to women. Because if you, as a single woman, know that guys are going to be more hesitant and more reluctant to make the first move, wow, you have a huge built in advantage over other women who are sitting back and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for the guy they like to step up.
Because those women are playing
So,
by the old rules and you're
right,
playing by the new rules. Yeah, well, I mean,
right.
this is the wild thing, and I really feel for young guys now that are coming up. I was on a night out not long ago with one of my friends, young dude, real successful guy, big YouTube channel, university degree, prestigious uni, all this stuff. We were on a night out, and I was like, "Oh, there's a group of girls over there. Why don't we go up and talk to them?" I'm like, bored of your crack. I'm bored of what you've got to say to me.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we go up and talk to them? And he looked like I'd suggested that we go and like pour their drink over their head. Couldn't believe the fact that I was suggesting that we go up and speak to a girl. No, I would never. I would absolutely never. What about all of the Me Too stuff? And that was the first time that I've ever seen in real life, you know, somebody that's close to me, that has similar values to myself, that's British, show the impact, the fear, like complete terror. And I think that you quote it in the book. You say men used to worry about being rejected. Now they're worried about being labeled a predator.
Yeah, that's a quote from Brian Howie, Brian runs kind of a comedy show or kind of a dating town hall called The Great Love Debate, and that was a quote from Brian. I mean, he does these kind of dating town halls all across the U.S., and that was his takeaway. But I'm curious, your friend, is he younger than you?
Yeah. He's 21, 22.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I talk to both men and women that age and that age group, I'm always amazed that there's like this. I mean, obviously, awkwardness and embarrassment, like it's never a good thing. But I feel like with the Gen Z crowd, there is a next level fear of saying or doing the wrong
Hypersensitive.
thing.
Hypersensitive.
Next, like any kind of awkwardness terrifies them. And, uh, I this doesn't bode well for dating because dating really involves taking chances. But the good news for women is that my kind of go-to line when I'm talking about make your move on the lecture circuit is that men like women who like them. So when a woman takes a chance, striking up a conversation with a guy, the odds of her having blowback are far less. Even though she's anxious and she's worried and she feels the awkwardness, I think the odds of it being a positive experience are better than for your friend. Or maybe it's all in our heads, but I think even if it is all in our heads, I just think there are these huge advantages for women to making the first move, particularly if they've already identified the guy they like.
This is the double-edged sword of the repercussions of Me Too into the dating market. I think that I can sympathize with the young guys who are lonely, would love to get a girlfriend, but are now terrified of being labeled a predator. I think that one of the best fixes that you could have would be for women to kind of get a firmware update to their operating system and realize that men aren't playing by that old set of rules anymore. So the thing is that women who aren't interested and women who are interested are both using the same strategies to respond to men that approach them. And the men aren't playing by that set of rules anymore. If you say no to a guy, and he's a respectable guy that's learned from Me Too, he's going to think, oh, fucking hell, like I better not push this. I don't want to end up on the front page of Reddit tomorrow. And
right.
But if you're doing that in some sort of a strategy to say, well, if I say no, that's kind of this sexy men love bitches strategy thing. I think that explains a lot about why sort of chatting up and the circuits of dating are crumbling a bit.
So I had an interesting conversation with a woman named Francesca Hogi, who's a kind of a high profile dating coach, matchmaker in Los Angeles. And we were talking about this very thing. And here's what I'm reading from the book here. She says, quote, if a woman comes across as indifferent, men will take that as a sign that she's not interested and will move on. It's getting to a point that if the woman doesn't make the first move, the men are not going to. This is not the time to be demure, at least not if you're single and don't want to be single. And I think she's right. I mean, I'm generalizing, and there are going to be individual situations that play out differently, but I'm writing, the advice in make your move is macro, not micro. And so I can't account for every individual situation, but I think what you just described is spot on, and that there has been this culture shift. And as a result, women who are willing to make the first move, or at least make it clear to men that if they make that, like, just to open the door wide enough so that the men know that it's safe to walk
clear,
through.
unambiguous signal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think, like, what happens as somebody who, like me, who's writing dating books and telling and sort of pushing out the idea of women making the first move is that you get people from the play hard to get crowd who they're quick to say, oh, terrible things happen to women who make the first move. And they paint this picture that's kind of like Cruella de Vil chasing some poor guy down the street. And that's their image of what a woman making the first move is. And to me, a first move by a woman can be much more subtle. I'll just give you an example from the book. There's a woman I interviewed, very attractive, really big personality. And, some guys are a little intimidated by women who are kind of the life of the party. But she was at a Super Bowl party a few years ago, talking to a guy who she really liked a lot. But he seemed nervous and wasn't sure what to do. So after like 45 minutes, she said to him, so are you going to ask for my number? Now, she didn't have to grab his ass or buy him a drink or, she didn't have to do anything outrageous. All she had to do was make it clear to him that if he called her or he texted her, she would say yes. And that's, that's the great thing from my perspective when it comes to women making the first move, is that it doesn't have to be this giant display, this big event, the way men sometimes think it has to be.